Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Neighbors Steal Our Dog, We Take Their Kids. This happened when I was around 12-13, so the details might be a little skewed. Most of my childhood, the house right next to ours has been condemned and abandoned. The property owners were willing to sell the land for $200, that's how bad it was. Eventually someone bought it and threw a manufactured home on it to replace the condemned home. Soon a nice old man moved in next door, and we didn't pay to close attention because he kept to himself. That was until his daughter moved in with him. Soon our quiet little neighborhood turned into an episode of white trash in trouble. The daughter would fight with her spouse about every little thing and keep my family, along with our neighbors, up half the night. Their kids were the worst part of all. We never knew how many kids lived in that house because so many different children and adults were in and out of there all the time. Me and my siblings tried to become friends with them, but we ended up being more of their babysitters. They would come over to our house and each of my siblings had a group of kids 3 to 4 each to watch over. These kids would walk in uninvited into our house. Then steal toys and games from our rooms. Honestly, they stole stuff from all over our house, but this was the main areas. They would either take it for themselves or throw it in our backyard river. They would constantly run in and out of our house, even if no one was with them. They would steal all of the fruit in the basket my mum left out for us. My mum confronted them about it and their 3-year-old son called her a witch. The parents refused to apologize for their behavior, saying stuff like, "If you loved it so much you wouldn't have let them take it," or "Don't parent my kid." One thing they would specifically do with me is they pulled on my hair all the time. I'm a tomboy, and they would just call me a boy in a wig because girls can't play with skateboards, girls can't play with ninja action figures, or any other gender stereotype. They would constantly bombard me because they truly didn't know girls were allowed to play with anything they wanted. One of their heavier children stole my skateboard and jumped on it, breaking it in half. Similar to that "so no head" vine. Then they said I shouldn't have been playing with one anyway. There are plenty more examples, but I think you get the point. The neighbors decided that because our house was nicer, or that we could afford basic things, that they had permission to run an electrical line from our house to theirs. Which in itself is a bad thing, but they decided to run off our electric bill to triple the cost of our original. We were lower middle class, below poverty level, so we couldn't afford that kind of bill. The rule in our house is if you're not using it is turned off. That's why my parents were awfully surprised to see an $800 electric bill. Eventually a person from our electric company came out to our house to see what was happening. They found an extension cord running to their house. The electrician simply unplugs it, and said that should be the end of that problem. My mum politely but sternly went to the neighbors that this was not okay. The neighbor had a small adult tantrum about it and cussed my mum out, but eventually come back into her home. My mum was obviously not pleased with their behavior, but tried not to escalate the situation any further. Our neighbors tried a few more times to run the line from our house to theirs. Each time when we unplugged it, they would cuss us out and send their kids over to destroy something else in our home. Eventually mum straight up told them if they come on our property again, she would call the police and press charges. We could still be friends with their kids, but they weren't allowed on our land. They decided that because we won't let them use our electricity, that the next best option was to steal our dog from the backyard, and claim our dog attacked her kids. Even though our dog was harmless and cowers at everything due to bad owners before us. The pound came and took our puppo away. By the time my brothers and I got home, she was already gone. We just assumed she ran off to our grandmother's who lived down the street. She would do this often because my grandma spoils her. When my parents came home, they about lost it, learning our dog was missing. By the time we found her at the pound, were putting her up for adoption. My parents had to re-adopt our dog because we didn't claim them in time. We even had her tags that say she belongs to us. The pound told us why the dog was taken, and my mum said enough was enough. Now the revenge. When my mum got home, she sent my little brother over to their house to play with their kids. My brother became a little spy that day. His job was to look around their house and report anything that could be suspicious. We learned from him that they were sitting 3 kids to a twin bed. The entire house was cramped and dirty. The old man that lived there was hardly home because he couldn't stand his adult daughter that lived there. All around the kids were being neglected. With the information my brother gathered, my mum called CPS, Child Protective Services, on the home. Within the month, all of the children minus one, who the old man cared for, were removed from the home. While I agree the foster system is bad, it was definitely better than what they were going through in that house. The mother of the children started to fight with the old man, her father, on everything, because her kids were no longer there as a distraction. The old man was to be her next victim. The old man eventually was fed up with her and kicked her out of the home. All that was left in the home was the old man and the grandson he was fostering. They are both very kind and amazing neighbors. The next one is titled, Boss Likes to See Me Beg. Enjoying seeing your money every day but not use it. So a bit of background first. I joined a bank and after a few months we had a management change in the division. The new division head brought some of the guys from his previous bank. Usually that's how it works in banks in my country. But the prickle was that he treated the old team members like crap and his boys were spending time surfing the net and presenting others' work to the management as their own. The issues: 1. I had an incredible workload which made me to 3 to 3.5 hours overtime daily without overtime pay. 2. My first year with the new boss I got 0 increase, while this boys, who joined in last 6 months, all got promotions. 3. The boss was petty and had a god complex, his boys would do apple polishing all day. 4. Gave no days off even when I had the flu. He and his boys would make sure everyone laughed and made fun of any tiny mistake that happened in my work. As I had a huge workload, I did make a few small mistakes but nothing that caused any loss. They know I got married and had a baby on the way, so I couldn't resign, so they went as far as making fun of my personal issues right in front of me. They were simply a gang of a-holes. So this goes on for like a good 1.5 years, until I got a substantial offer from a better bank. It was a unique department and we have less than 10 banks in my country, so other opportunities were hard to come by. So one fine 1st of January, got the offer letter for the new job and decided to resign. That same day my yearly performance review was done. As expected, it was a shitty one since I was doing nothing important. So I decided to resign in protest of the bad performance review. Now it's important to know the law in my country to switch banks. In order to join another bank from a new bank, you need a release letter from your previous bank, and in order to get your pay from the new bank you need a NOC, no objection certificate, from your previous bank. Normally the banks give NOC a month after your last working day. It's done to see if you have any things hiding in your desk that might be fraud of stealing money. Yes, that happens a lot. That way you can be forced to come back to your previous employer to settle the irregularities. Also legally you have to give a 3 months notice period, but in practice a month is given and the next 2 months are waived, depending how senior your position is. Mine was not. So here is my boss' final upset. He says I have to do the whole 3 months because the work I was doing was very technical and needed longer to be learned by the guys in the team. But my last 2 yearly performance reviews said I was not doing anything important. Also, I had a staff loan that had an outstanding about of just 20% of my basic salary, so my manager told me because of the policy, which I missed in fine print in HR manual, I would not be paid monthly salary, but at the end of my 3 months notice period I would be paid all my outstanding dues minus the loan amount, which was just peanuts. Now my pro-revenge ensues. Firstly, I had told my new employer that I would be joining after 3 months and they agreed, so I was good on that. I had savings so I could wait out the 3 months, but it would be very difficult for me to manage. Suddenly the boss and his boys started joking about me not getting pay and being a beggar. They would put their change coins on my workstation and tell it's charity. So they want to see me beg? They shall see me beg. I went to my boss, told him a story and asked him for some cash, faked some tears as well. Did the same to each of his boys. Since they all had God complex, seeing me beg for money stroked their egos, and they gave me cash to help me out since I was broke and had no money for my son's milk and diapers. It was done with a condition not to tell anyone, please. It took them 2 weeks to tell each other that I was begging for money from each of them, and they all gave me. Collectively I had borrowed 2 months of my salary from the boss and his boys. By this time I had already done 1 month of notice period. So since it was just cash given by one person to another in a closed cabin room or outside the bank, there was no paper proof that I had borrowed money. Given the shitty law and order situation in my country, they couldn't recover the money from me anyway else. The boss smelled the revenge brewing, as he understood what I was doing. All of a sudden the boss and his boys were nice to me, the jokes stopped, and they finally assigned 3 guys to take over my work. But my revenge had already started. I would come to the office around 11 o'clock AM and leave around 3 o'clock PM instead of the usual 9 AM to 6 PM hours. Suddenly I had an amnesia attack and wasn't much help for the guys taking over my work. So they had to go through trial and error, which impacted operations and got them slack from management. My boss, realizing that since I owed them money which they can't recover if I am upset or fired, decided to let me leave the bank immediately. So the HR was told to release me on urgent basis. In their hurry, they made a fatal mistake. The next day HR manager called me in, handed over my release letter and NOC at the same time, along with all the money I was owed, Provident Fund, etc. In short, I was free to join the new bank and even get paid. So the previous bank cannot claim anything to me now. Plus I had more than enough money in my account. So after the usual best of luck and all the best on my final day at work, the manager said, "You owe XXX amount to me and the boys. It would be nice if you can transfer that amount to his account and he will distribute it with the boys." My reply was, "What money?" I proceeded to join the new bank and lived happily ever after. I got a lot of calls and treats from the boss and his boys. But duck them. As extra rubbing, I kept the amount I owed them in my account in the same bank. So every morning they would come to work, pull up my account balance, see their money sitting there, gave a few bad words to me, and carry on with their work. It's been 6 years now, the money is still there, and I made sure the account is active. The last one is titled, "How We Destroyed Our Teacher and Principal." Apologies in advance if some details are blurry, as this happened almost 14 years ago. Also, this is going to be a long one, so bear with me. I swear the result is worth it, at least it is to me. The beginning, it all started when I, male 25, was 12 years old. My grade 7 teacher, male 46 at the time, was infamous for being intimidating and, in my opinion, abusive to his students. He was the disciplinarian of the school. He was in charge of keeping track of detentions and announcing who will be sitting every Friday during assembly. We suspected at that time that the reason why he never got fired was either because his students were too scared to report him, or because of the fact that the principal was his brother-in-law. Reasons why I hated him: he was constantly making vaguely racist remarks, complaining about the New South Africa, and constantly bringing up how his life was better during the apartheid regime. He's a white guy who was raised on a farm. I always felt like he had an issue with me as a person because I'm a practicing Muslim. He would make the class laugh at how funny Muslim women looked with their heads wrapped up. His jokes about Muslims missing out on eating bacon were endless. In fact, he one day purposely stood in front of my desk eating a cheese and bacon panini. He used to often rant about how the school is no longer a pure Christian institution as it once was back in the day. He would say these things and glance at either me, my twin sister, or the black students in the class who practiced their own African religions. When it was his birthday, my mum encouraged me to buy him a gift. I spent of my pocket money, which was already limited, my parents didn't believe in allowances, to buy him a big slab of chocolate and a long piece of Drowa's dried sausage. Throughout the day, he would get gifts from students in his class and others. He would get up from his desk to greet and thank them, and then shake their hand. I remember noticing this because I always found it weird when students shook hands with teachers because of how small our hands were compared to theirs. However, when I gave him my gift, all he did was look at me for like a second, look away and nod his head slightly. I remember being thankful for not offering my hand out for him to shake because I thought he might have ignored it in front of the entire class. To say I felt like crap is an understatement. The experience that made me hate him the most happened just before we wrote second or third term exams. I was walking with my friend David, fake name, back from the tuck shop during interval. We took a shortcut between the English and Afrikaans kindergarten classes and saw a group of boys huddled together. One of them walked towards us and I saw that he had one of those camping multi-tools with the folding knife out, and instantly got a fright. He told us, "Give me your stuff before I cut your neck," and then started laughing and walked back to his friends. It was clearly a joke, but David looked close to tears and I had a very bad fright because of what he done. I told the guy, fake name Xander, that he's not allowed to have knives at school and that I'm going to tell my teacher. We walked straight to our teacher, and when we spoke to him, David burst into tears. We told him what happened and David was sobbing when he said he felt like he was going to die. Our teacher barely looked up from his computer while we were speaking, and when he asked for the guy's name, we told him the name and he said he will deal with it and for us to go out for interval again. I went home and told my mum, who I felt didn't fully believe me at the time. The next day we saw Xander were basically making fun of him for getting into trouble with our teacher and likely getting expelled at worst, or sitting a Saturday detention at best. He laughed back at us and said our teacher just came to his class, asked to speak to him and told him to never bring it to school again. No detention. No suspension. Basically nothing. He still had the knife on him for the rest of the day before. We were so upset we went back to our teacher and I told him that Xander said that he didn't get into trouble for having the knife. He gave me the ugliest look as if I was bothering him, and coldly said to me that maybe I should fix my late coming problem before I try to get other people in trouble. I would come late 4 or 5 times a month because my mum's car's battery terminals were broken, so the battery would run flat and she couldn't afford to have it fixed. She had to put the neighbor's battery in her car, start it, and then idle it while she took the battery out and put her own battery back in to charge up. My mum taught me the value of always having a number 10 spanner in your car, lol. I felt betrayed by my teacher. The person who was supposed to make us feel safe while we were away from home. When I spoke to my friends about it, they told me that Xander was actually the principal's son, meaning he was my teacher's nephew. I decided to take the opportunity to speak to my friends about getting evidence that our teacher is treating students unfairly. 3 of my 4 close friends had camera phones. I sat in the far left corner, my one friend sat in the opposite corner by the door, our other friend sat in the middle, and the last friend was right at the back of the class by the window on the left. One thing about our teacher, he did not give a duck about where we sat as long as we answered him when he done roll call, and didn't bother anyone when we swapped seats. We came to an agreement that whenever our teacher would sound like we was going to say something vaguely racist or Islamophobic, we would all discreetly take videos of him. Any private conversation we had with him was voice recorded on our phones. We caught him on camera telling a really racist joke about black people, and saying that Hindus must have a lot of problems since they have so many gods. We caught him saying a lot of bad things, but a lot slipped through our fingers because we weren't fast enough. It was extremely difficult to keep our friend group motivated to record him and not tell anyone else about it. It was especially difficult because at the time I had a hand-me-down Samsung D900, which was seen as an expensive phone at the time. My mum prohibited me from taking it to school. She instead bought a cheap R79 $5 phone for us that could only make calls and send SMSs. This was in case she needed to reach us in an emergency. I got caught several times sneaking my camera phone to school. My biggest mess up at school was when my mum phoned me on my Samsung and I answered it. Big oof, but I was a dumbass. After I think a month, we decided that we couldn't let it go any further. One of our friends was a black guy named Tatenda, fake name. Tatenda was a problem child. His mum died when he was 4 and his dad was an alcoholic. He was raised mostly by his uncle, who up until today I think was a pimp. He used to act out at school because of undiagnosed ADHD. His dad and uncle didn't believe in learning disabilities and always assumed he was just lazy and badly behaved. Tatenda especially got onto our teacher's nerves because not only was he black, but because he would bring broken calculators from home and take them apart during class. One day our teacher told him to clear his desk and throw away the bits of plastic and calculator crap. He ignored the teacher. The teacher then started screaming at him, and Tatenda done the only logical thing a 12-13-year-old would do in such a situation. He mockingly put 2 pencils into his ears. Our teacher lost his crap, grabbed Tatenda and threw him against the door. The narrow window pane cracked and Tatenda's head was bleeding. He told us he was fine during interval afterwards, and we put money together to buy him a Sprite. I almost cried when my friend who sat way behind me said he got the whole thing on camera. We didn't even trust that the whole class testimony would get him into trouble. We decided that enough was enough. The revenge: first we showed the video to Tatenda's uncle, who showed it to his father. Then I showed my mum all the other videos and recordings. She lost her mind. One of my friends sent all of it to his older sister, who had a Facebook account, and she posted it there and tagged the school and as many parents as she knew. It blew up. Parents and people from around the province phoned the school demanding answers as to what is going to happen to our teacher. He was immediately suspended. There were rumors circulating that he had to go into hiding because Tatenda's uncle and his friends were looking to kill him. I even met Tatenda's dad for the first time in the weeks after the whole thing exploded. He liked to joke that his dad sobered up especially for this lol. The principal pulled Xander out of the school. We never saw him again. My mum told me an investigation was launched against the school because of the improper handling of bullying complaints. If I remember correctly, 3 English kids in my class alone spoke out against teachers dismissing their complaints of bullying by the Afrikaans kids. We were a mostly white, Afrikaans-speaking school with 3 Afrikaans classes but only 1 English class per grade. They called us Sooties, which was short for Soutpeel, which literally translates as salty dick. It's a derogatory term for English-speaking, white South Africans. It means your one leg in is South Africa, your other leg is in England, so your dick is hanging in the ocean. We only saw our teacher once after he was suspended. He looked badly beaten up, and was accompanied by a policeman and 2 other male teachers so he could gather the rest of his stuff from his class. But it didn't end there. Because so many kids needed the evidence that they were being bullied and nothing was done because of it, the CCTV footage was brought up. My friend's mother, who was part of the school governing body that time, told us a few years ago that when they reviewed the footage, it became apparent that the principal was having an affair with one of the grade 2 teachers. He could be seen grabbing her butt at the furthest point away from the camera. They slipped up a few times and kissed in clear view of the camera, but I guess once you're surrounded by the cameras every day at work, you forget that they're there. It was very apparent that sometimes they thought they couldn't be seen. My mum's friend's sister, basically my aunt, sells Tupperware, and one of her regular customers and close friends is the principal's ex-wife. Not only did she leave him, but they were not married in community of property due to a prenup agreement. The house they lived in was in her name since before marriage, so she effectively made him homeless because none of his family wanted to take him in. He ran into severe debt from staying in guest houses and burned many bridges from overstaying his welcome at friends. As for my teacher, his reputation was destination fucked. He served jail time, don't know how long, and eventually left the country because it seemed everyone knew his face from the media attention he received. The reason why I made this post: I was never going to tell this story on Reddit as I've told it over and over through the years since primary school. But I felt I had to because of what I experienced at the beginning of this year. My family is part of a non-profit organization that has feeding schemes all over the country. The last Friday feed of February I'm standing security as I usually do since we're few volunteers and there's many homeless people and most are on drugs and can get violent. I'm walking down the line to make sure there are no fights or anything that could start a riot, and I see a familiar face. My old principal is standing in the line, waiting for a bowl of stew and bread, with absolutely no idea who's standing beside him. Obviously he wouldn't have recognized me, but I never forgot his face. I'm not gonna lie, I cried quite a bit behind my sunglasses. Seeing him brought back the feelings I had when I was 12 years old in 7th grade, trying absolutely every excuse in the book to not have to go to school and be bullied by my teacher. So yeah, for those of you who are still reading, this is the end of how my friends and I destroyed the lives of my teacher and principal. If you got this far and are feeling depressed, worthless, or less than your peers, I love you. I appreciate you, and you are seriously ducking awesome. Bye bye. Edit 1. Now, there seems to be a lot of people who don't believe me, and to be honest, I don't really know what to tell you. I didn't post it here to be believed, I posted it for myself, for my friends. But since I have an inignorable need to be liked by random people on Reddit, I'll explain. People have pointed out that there are holes in my story like Facebook. I honestly don't know if Facebook was a big deal in 2006. I was 12, I didn't speak to my friend's sister because she was like twice my age. He came to school and told us she posted it. My mum showed me the post a while after. Also, I didn't have 2 phones. My mum's boss got the Samsung D900 as a gift when it came out and decided to give it to my mum as part of her bonus. My mum then gave it to my grandma, who used it for a while, who gave it to my aunt, who also used it, who finally gave it to me. It wasn't an old, broken phone, but it still was a hand-me-down. That said, my mum took the measure of buying the cheap Nokia phone for myself and my sister to use so that our more expensive phones lasted longer and didn't get stolen at school. We weren't rich, but we went to bed having eaten every night, because my mum and dad worked insane hours and lived without the luxury of having a car that started every morning, to make it so. And to the guy with the tractor username who lived in SA for only 1.5 years and can make a sweeping declaration that the traditional African religions are no longer practiced here, you know more about the country I've lived in all my life than I do. I applaud you, sir. I shared a very traumatic period of my life with you, using as many words as I felt was necessary. If you don't want to read it, then don't. It's no skin off my face. I love you all. Even the skeptical ones. Thank you. Thanks for listening.